was the final straw that made you quit a job? Story 1. After years of no raises due to budget constraints, I learned that a newly hired coworker was making like 30 more than me. Didn't help that he absolutely sucked. Story 2. I was told I should have managed my time off better. My mom was found dead in her apartment. The coroner couldn't even guess the day she died. I had to clean her apartment, go to court hearings of her behalf, and was relentlessly harassed by another family that thought she had any kind of money, and I had to go to the police. I took 4 days off. I needed to get out of work like 2 hours early to pick up her ashes and got hit with that. I was hired at a different company the next day. I came in to have lunch with my coworkers and clean out my things, and just left. Management or HR never bothered to call me, they knew. Story 3. I was the de facto manager at a hobby store back in 2001. The owner had chased everyone else off. I was doing all the manager duties at the pay of a regular store associate. One day I come in and one of our regular customers is behind the counter. I ask him what's going on and he says he's the new manager. I went with it for a few months. Turns out the guy was a snake. He tried to lock me in the bathroom so I de-clean it. Next day when the owner was there doing orders, I threw my key at him, told him to go himself, and left. I walked to the other end of the strip mall and was promptly hired at mailboxes etc. Larry, worked in a factory a few years ago. Pay was decent, but the guy who operated the indoor crane was an alcoholic. The moron almost took my head off with a hook. A colleague who saw it told me he was amazed that he didn't hit me. Moron wasn't even reprimanded. I got a job at another factory a few miles away just 2 days later. They had heard of the abysmal reputation of that place, as they had already hired 4 people from there before me. Story 4. Boss said, "We expect you to go above and beyond without extra pay, extra respect, or even extra coffee." I went above and beyond straight out the door. Story 5. Edit. It's a long read. I apologize ahead of time. My last job, I was warehouse manager, installer and delivery for heavy arcade equipment. Over 3 years, they had a high turnover rate, but my boss was cool. Later on I found out why the turnover rate was high. The company owner was a massive. The day I quit, I was going through a heavy depression, but still showed up to work because I did enjoy the work. I showed up at 6:50 a.m., clock in is at 7 a.m. Use the bathroom. I come out and the owner was outside waiting for me to come out. No good morning, no how are you, nothing. Just, clock in time is at 7 right? I look at the clock and it's 6:58. I looked at him and say good morning and walk to the punch ignoring his comment. I start my work day and look at the sheet for what I have for the day. It's a packed day from start to finish. About 30 minutes into the shift I just lost all drive. Again, depression is a. My mind kept racing about everything I had to do and then some. My heart started pounding. I was short on breath and started to feel like I wanted to. I called my boss and explained the situation. Asked if I could go home and he told me yes. Have a good day and I hope you feel better. Call me if you want to talk. I didn't even pack my personal tools. I just clocked out, got in my truck and started crying completely on edge. Sat there for 20-ish minutes. The owner comes out with a pissed off face asking why I'm not working, getting ready for the day. I told him I was having a bad morning and I needed to leave. I had already confirmed with B that it was okay to take the day. The owner then says no, you already clocked and you have to finish your shift. I'm usually a cool, calm and relaxed person at work, but as soon as he said that, I completely lost it. I got out of the truck and the first things out of my mouth, before I could even think, were, I don't have to do a thing. If I said I am having a bad morning, I am having a bad morning. You seem to forget him here because I choose to be here. You don't pay me anywhere near enough for the amount of responsibility and work that I do. He stared at me with a WTF just happened expression. Then following what I said before he even got a word in, I blurted out, you know what? If I can't leave then I quit, plain and simple. Find someone else that can do everything I do and isn't going to complain or steal from you. Got back in my truck and left. Skipped out on a week and a half of work. Never even left the house. Then my boss calls me asking if I'm okay and that he saw what happened on the camera in front of the building, and apologized for it on behalf of the owner. Asked me to come back and all. I said I'd come back under the conditions that I get a raise and a helper. He said yes, we can talk about it here. I show up the next day, everything is cool. Then the owner shows up talking about how it was extremely disrespectful the way I spoke to him, blah blah blah. I looked at B and said, you know what man, I'm good, I'm just going to look for something else. 3 days later I was at a company across the street getting paid almost twice what I was making with them with none of the responsibility or problems. I'm still friends with B. Last we spoke, he said they had to hire 3 people to do what I was doing. All the owner had to do was agree to what I was asking for and some respect. He would have saved a ton more money than hiring 3 people. Edit 2. This was the first time in my life I experienced angry depression, with a panic attack alongside it that turned into more anger. A panic attack while driving home. Hope to never have that experience of being unable to breathe again. Story 6. In college I worked at a grocery store. I either worked mid-shifts or I closed the store. We closed at 12 a.m. On a morning after I closed, the store manager was calling me from 6 to 7 a.m. asking me where I was and telling me that if I didn't come in I was getting a write-up. I had never opened the store. I also worked until 12 a.m. the night before. I didn't appreciate her bullshit threats of writing up. I walked into the store in my pajamas, found her and handed her my keys. Story 7. I was working as an IC for 5 years with the same company. I handled multiple clients at any given moment and was the longest employee my boss had. There had never been an issue. I had never considered leaving the position as it was work from home, allowed me a little more control over my schedule, and paid decently. Fast forward to September of last year, My biggest client, who took up literally a third of my income, decided they wanted a different contractor because of one spelling error on an internal memo despite knowing that I'm dyslexic. As an IC, I have no protections. I figured things would for a month, that I would have to pinch pennies, but my supervisor would hand me a client soon as she claimed that she had a backlog of clients that she needed to pair with someone. It never happened. Instead, I was told that she couldn't trust me to do my job, that maybe the way her company does the job isn't for me, and a bunch of other things that made absolutely no sense. This is a virtual assistant company. I've been an executive assistant for more than a decade. It's something I'm extremely good at. After that meeting, I started looking elsewhere. It took me until February of this year, but I'm now in a job that I absolutely love and thrive in, even if I'm not working from home anymore. Definitely made the right decision because my ex-supervisor tried to gaslight me into staying when I gave her a week's notice. My contract that I had signed 5 years prior that had a rollover clause had a mandatory 1-week notice. Those who had signed on in the past year had a mandatory 2-week notice with a recommendation of 30 days. Needless to say, I told her that her lack of planning was not my problem, and that maybe she should think twice about punishing her hardest workers by threatening their livelihood. Story 8 had an IT problem crop up that took out email. I was the fill-in IT person, the only IT person. The regular IT guy was away and somewhere, at the time, uncontactable boss hounded me for hours until the issue was fixed. It was an issue that shouldn't have been able to happen, but we were using such ancient versions of the AV and MS Exchange that it did. For those wondering, the AV took out the mail store. We were one of the biggest sellers of both products. New versions would have cost us nothing. A week later, I was called into the owner's office and he had a go at me for letting my sales figures drop for the month. The month I was also doing all the IT. I knew where he heading, so I pointed out all the faults in the company and how they all led back to him and his lack of leadership. Silly man had left his office door open, so everyone heard every word I said. I then clearly articulated exactly what he could do with his job, spoke to the payroll person on the way out, had every cent I was entitled to be the close of business that day. Cost the business a $15,000 deal on software sales. The IT guy quit the next day in solidarity, and 2 other salespeople found the door. Story 9. They were blowing up my phone while I was on vacation at Disney, with something that could have easily waited. I quit within a month of returning from vacation. Story 10. My mother died. They refused to give me time off. BC. My mother wasn't having a service. I provided the obituary and gave them the name of the contact at the funeral home. I just couldn't them anymore. Story 11. I had a manager once who would agree to things but never wanted it in writing. He just shrugged it off as he's an informal guy. Like, sure to go, but you can leave early on Tuesdays and finish your shift from home so your wife can go to work and you can be home for the bus. Hunky-dory until he decided it wasn't and threw me under the bus for working an arrangement he never agreed to. I learned a lot about CYA from working for that douchebag. Story 12. I'm a French trained chef with a degree in restaurant management who's been cooking for 16 years now. I had a shift lead who was notorious for undercooked everything and sending out raw beef and chicken. Tell me, just shut up and do what I tell you or I'm sending you home. I looked him dead in eyes, took off my apron, told him I quit, and went home. Made people sick with his food, and he tried to tell me that the chili was still fine after being out of temp for an hour, when they let go of the cleaning staff and expected us to clean the bathrooms. And this was halfway into 2020. It's bad enough to clean a bathroom, but during a pandemic that I spent a year reorganizing workflow, I ended up getting profit up by 9 without increasing revenue. That simply meant less wastage. Then a new higher-up manager came in, looked around, and said, "Dude, I've never seen a place run like this. Let me fix it," and proceeded to insist on putting everything back to how it had been. Story 13. We had internal employee satisfaction surveys and our department consistently ranked amongst the highest in the company. New director comes in and absolutely destroys morale, and our next survey reflects that. He has a fit and blames his managers. He believed that nothing would ever stick to him because he was such a greasy little. But we stuck that to him. I left shortly thereafter. On my last day he comes ripping into the office at 10 after 5 and I have tidied everything up and am about to walk out the door. He tells me to hold on as he has to conduct my exit interview. It lasts about 10 minutes before devolving into an expletive-filled screaming match. It was awesome. Story 14. They lied to me for 3 years about qualifying for a student loan forgiveness program. Flat out lied. The day they refused to sign the paper they promised they could and would, I applied for the job I'm at now. Story 15. Being moved from a cubicle to a table because I was a contractor and the cubicles were for FTE, during COVID when most FTE full-time employees were working remotely. Story 16. When I got a write-up because the manager decided he wanted to throw me under the bus for his manipulation of our inventory to cover the audit we were about to get. This was a day after I found out my dad had cancer, threw my badge right in his face and walked out. Story 17. Year was 1999 to 2000 and I was 20 years old. I was on a crew of about 8 to 10 people installing underground fiber optic lines primarily around the Denver metro area. We typically worked 3 weeks on, 1 week off. Since most of us lived in a different city, we got hotel accommodations and 30-day per diem. I was dating the boss daughter at the time, which he had no problem with initially because I had grown up a member of the same church. I was also a crew lead with an impeccable attendance and performance record. However, he caught wind of the fact that my coworkers and I were spending copious amounts of money on Jägermeister, weed and various club drugs on our spare time. He apparently was not jiving on that because he took all of our per diem down to the minimum of 15-day, and instead of a full check up front for the week, it was a daily allowance. Understandable, I guess, but then he did something totally underhanded without warning one day. He hires this other dude and invited me to drive around with him scouting out the new job locations for the upcoming week. I had no idea who this guy was, but instead of scouting out jobs, we scouted out used truck lots. After 5 hours of truck shopping, kissing from the new guy and openly discussing this new salary higher than mine and new job title of foreman higher ranking than me, he picks out a 2-year-old F-250, pays cash for it and gives the keys to the new guy as a signing bonus. Then gave me a wink and said something shitty like, "You do the right things, you get treated the right way." I got back to my room that night, got incredibly plastered on Jaeger and marched right up to his room and spat my resignation in his face, including breaking up with his daughter to him. Kinda forgot I was 200 miles from home, so in the middle of the night, I called my mom and she drove over the mountain to retrieve me and my suitcase. When I came to the next day at my parents' house, I was mortified to realize that I had just quit in that fashion. Oops. Story 18. I was asked to shovel snow all around our building, which is large BTW, when I was the only one in my department while they have a ton of other people in other departments. I get behind on my work and literally no one could help me catch up while I waste an hour doing that. No. That place outperformed my goals but underpaid on my bonus because my sales peers underperformed, not my actual team or myself, and am already going above and beyond working 10 to 16 hours each day carrying deadweight. Story 19. Was forced to move. Found out that the state I was moving to people got paid more. Got a hold of the HR document that explicitly said how much, so I had to fight for that raise. Was playing D&D with a guy who just graduated college, working in the same field, and he was making literally double what I was. Found a much better paying job shortly after. Story 20. Haven't quit yet, but I recently had my final straw moment. My manager, who knows about my hobbies and that I do said hobbies to deal with the stress of work, indicated I'm spending too much time doing what I enjoy and that I'm not spending enough of my energy at work. To clarify, my job consumes most of my energy and leaves me mentally and emotionally exhausted at the end of the day. I do physical activities after work, during my evenings and weekends, to cope and reduce my stress levels. It has never once interfered with my job aside from making it easier to deal with. This comment comes after I performed well during one of the hardest years of my life, because I had an outlet. I'm done, already sending out resumes. Story 21. I worked at a gas station and someone literally from the entrance of the store all the way to the bathroom and then on the bathroom floor, I was getting paid 10 an hour. I did not get paid enough for that, literally. Story 22. My manager was such a controlling, narcissistic dude. Punched a wall in the office when something minor went wrong and no one did anything about it. Not even a warning. I realized that was my last day there. Story 23. Made a mistake that was easy to fix. Coworker of mine reported this to the duty manager, who then publicly humiliated me in front of all my colleagues and then had the nerve to say that I would fail my university studies the way I was approaching my job. Man, I was pissed at the way the whole thing was handled, and I was very close to handing in my apron and saying I quit. Even now, nearly a decade later, it makes me angry thinking how I was treated. I never went back to that place after that shift. There were a lot of things up about that place, but that incident sealed it for me. Fortunately, it was only meant to be a temporary gig anyway, and I returned back to university just a few days later. If I have a bad day at my current job, I always think at least my current working environment is so much better. Story 24. They wouldn't promote me. My boss had quit and I was doing all of the work already. Just as I had for the 10 months before they hired the boss that quit, so I got the promotion elsewhere. They had the gall to tell me that I was due about to get the promotion if I was willing to stay. I told them I'd think about it just to lead them on, but I was out the door. Story 25. Boss came to my house on a Saturday night to do my performance review. It was actually my parents' house and he scared the out of my dad who pulled a gun on him. I had been using their house for my mailing address. Figured it was a sign when I made an HR complaint and was told I was in the wrong for putting the wrong address on my documents. He saw no repercussions and I left as fast as I could. Story 26. Was the new guy on an assembly line. I was the only new guy on that line. Was outing together pieces of sound systems. I was step 1 in the process. Everyone was dead silent and until breaks, the only voices I heard were people passing the tested piece back to me saying you messed up 10 hours a day, you messed up, or some variation of it, you messed up, you messed up, you messed up every day. All I would hear for over a month. It just eroded my mental. Had there been any other chatter on the line, I think I would have been fine, even if it didn't involve me, but there wasn't. Didn't help that the boss was kinda sus and we also sometimes had mandatory overtime that we wouldn't know about till near the end of the week. We wouldn't know if we were gonna meet the quota until near the end of the week, which made planning for weekend activities a pain. Story 27. The way everyone would have very specific quirky responses in unison when the two managers who gave speeches said certain things made it seem like a toxic positivity cult. Story 28. The managers did not care that a coworker was threatening to shoot us all. We had hundreds of text message proof. He finally fired her after she was called to his office because she was slacking at her position and she said that his opinion was dumb. But it's crazy how nobody cares when someone says they want to shoot up the place with their uncle's rifles. Story 29. Harassment. Being told there was no money for a pay rise for the 3rd year, and then the owner turning up and bragging about his new Porsche he bought the same day while I was barely scraping by. Story 30. I was a part-time stalker at a Sherwin-Williams. I made it very clear to my manager that this was my part-time gig for side money. I had my full-time job where I paid my bills and everything from Sherwin was just for hobbies. He was super cool and understood the situation. I show up, stock the shelves and take care of the warehouse, then help customers with paint if needed. 14 hours a week, no problem, easy money. My manager got promoted to regional sales manager and our store got a new manager. Well, call her Jessica. Jessica came from a different store and it was her first time managing. She was kinda alright but also pretty annoying and would micromanage. Shortly after her joining I moved apartments from 5 minutes away to about 45 away to be closer to my full-time job. The upside to this was I could stop by Sherwin's on the way and get supplies if my store needed something. Anyways, in my time there I had some paint spill on my shoe, nothing much, just a little white paint on the side of my black shoes. Jessica decided to change the dress policy one of the days I wasn't there, and really the only thing that changed was that you have to have all black shoes. This was never communicated to the team by anything other than the people there that day getting told. I show up to work after stopping by a couple of stores on the way to pick up material. Jessica is late ASF like usual, so I take care of the store with the assistant manager. She never mentioned the dress code change to me, so I still have no idea that there's been any changes. I'm working taking care of some customers and Jessica comes up to me, interrupts my conversation with a customer just to berate me about having white paint on my shoes. Again, this is a drip of paint maybe 2 inches long at most on the side of my shoe. She yells at me to go home and change my shoes. I'm confused by this and the customer is looking at me like WTF is going on. I ask Jessica if she's kidding because, again, I have no idea there's been a dress code change. She tells me to go home right now and change my shoe. I double-check with her that she wants me to drive 45 minutes home, change shoes, and drive 45 minutes back with a decently busy store that's short-staffed. She said, "You leave now, bye." I head home and as I'm sitting in traffic I'm stewing. I'm annoyed and angry about this. It's a waste of my time. I called my dad to chat with him while I'm waiting and he's appalled by it. After about 15 minutes of driving and chatting I've made up my mind. I turn around and head back to the store. I get there and head straight into the back, grab my speaker and charger from my cubby, head into the office and erase my name off the board, scribble out my contact info on the sheet, and walk out. There's a huge line of people waiting to be helped and Jessica is trying to take care of one of them. I butt into her conversation and give her it was nice working here, but then walk out. As I'm about to get into my truck Jessica runs out and asks where I'm going. Home. You were disrespectful ASF and an good luck I'm out and drove off. The best part was all of this was like 8 years ago and I only just got my last check about a month ago. Story 31. Target Canada Starbucks. Wasted 6 weeks of trying learn everything and help as much as I could. The last day of training I got hauled up into the office by the department manager and assistant manager and for a good 10 minutes just gripe about all the flaws I had. Most of it had to do with my face and then told me I am horrible at customer service. I have a good case of resting face, and like most neurodivergents I can mask it, unless I need to really concentrate. The customer service part, the store isn't even open to the public and the customer service was all roleplay and I told them right at hiring I'm absolutely at roleplaying. Anyways, they made me feel like I was back in grade 9 again and I was a weepy snotty mess. Clocked out. Husband took one look at me when he came to pick me up and said I'm not going back and well make do. Blocked their numbers, never looked back. The third bounced paycheck. Story 32. Safety from remedial violent teenagers who were sent to that school as the last recourse due to behavior at other schools. I felt physically unsafe after just one day. Story 33. They wanted us to sell magazine subscriptions at the register. I knew this meant they were going under, so I decided it was a good time to end my career of 24 years in retail. Several months later the whole chain went bankrupt and was out of business forever. Story 34. Working 6 days a week as a 32-hour-a-week salaried employee. Was asked to fill in for the manager who left with no pay raise. After complaining to highest levels was told until I work 120 hours a week no help will be brought it. That's what it means to be a manager at this large healthcare organization. I had a new job and resigned within a month. Story 35. When I was the only one who stayed in, working during everyone else's smoke break and the manager would go with them, telling me what needed to be done while they were on break. Story 36. Haha. I worked at a digital marketing company some time ago, maybe 2 or 3 months. I brought the division back to life and things were happening. The day I found out one of my subordinates was harassed by my boss and the owner of the company I quit. It was not harassment. She was threatened with police and all kinds of lawsuits for no reason. She, being a young and very talented lady, was almost held at gunpoint. The boss man was a convicted felon for grand larceny in California in the past. Yep, that was the last straw. Story 37. 3 stories. 3 times managers decided to FAFO. Story 1. I used to work at a bar as a dishwasher and I was worked doubles for 3 weeks straight, and when we finally get another dishwasher, I'm expected to train him ECT, so after busting my with 3 weeks of doubles 5 days a week, I asked for a raise and told I wasn't worth more than a 10-cent raise. So 2 days pass and I set up an interview for another spot, got hired fairly easy, and I was hired $2 more than I made at the shop. Told old boy to F off and I'm done. The other guy quit 4 days later, and they tried to work him like me when I did doubles for 3 weeks. They were left without a dishwasher for 1 day before they called me back and offered me 50 cents more to come back. I just laughed and told them, you FAFO, if you want the other stories LMN. Story 38 When I realized my opinion on any topic would be overlooked, even if I'm the biggest expert in the room, my old boss had the nasty habit of thinking he's the one who knows, like I'm a programmer, 10 years experience, and the most he did at programming was a 2 to 3 week boot camp, but I thought he considered my opinion, even if grading, as equals. One day I got the example that anything that comes out of my mouth has no value to him, so basically, when COVID started to be less of an issue, we restarted going to the office, once a month, me being on his way to the office, we decided to have him pick me up on the way. Save on fuel, sure. On the way back, I see his GPS is stupid and just tell him yo cut through this parking lot and boom, you'll be at my home. There is absolutely no way he knows more than me, that's my neighborhood and he lives half an hour further. But he brushes me off and decides to follow his GPS. That sends us 2 lights further than it even should before turning around to my home. That's when I decided I need to change jobs this. Story 39 When it took 4 years to get from 30K to 38K after 3 promotions up to manager and still doing the tasks of my 2 previous roles. When I asked to bump me to 40K they said they couldn't because my boss wasn't making that. What do you mean a supervisor isn't making 40K yet? I had to go, poverty was catching up. Next job jumped me to 65K with less responsibility and workload. This was right before COVID inflation so made it out just in time. PS job hopping works because I doubled it the next year still doing the same job with less responsibility. Story 40 Pushed out of promotion for the manager's good friend after giving 5 years to that place I said it. Got hammered that night, Monday, put in my 2 weeks. Then had the easiest 2 weeks at that job. Story 41 It was Easter Sunday, and I was working at a Borders bookstore. Place was super dead since everyone expected it would be closed. I had finished all my sidelines work, restocking candy and gift cards, tidying up the back area, prepping books to be picked up. Since it was dead, I started reading a book. Mind you, this is the first time I ever read anything on the clock, but there was literally no customers in the store and nothing to do. The manager came up and put the book back but didn't say anything. I picked it up again, and manager comes back and asks me to go into her office. She claimed that a manager who disliked me had said I was previously reading on the clock before, which I said was a lie. She said she'd watch the camera recordings, so I told her to do it. It'd just be a waste of her time because it never happened. Regardless, she says she's going to write me up for reading on the clock, which is tantamount to stealing from the company. I told her I've never been written up and I wasn't going to start that day, and that I quit, got to my parents' house just in time for Easter dinner being set down on the table. She said I'd never be able to work for Borders again, which I found very funny because I was already working another full-time job that paid almost twice as much. It got even funnier when Borders permanently went out of business only a couple years later. Still haven't been written up on the job to this day. Never walked off another job without notice, but have had 0 regrets about doing it that time. Story 42 The manager was abusive and started berating and insulting me, being super rude. I just quit on the spot. Terrence, lack of professionalism, and it's the same for most of the companies around here. To just somehow want to get by instead of getting things done properly, and I hated it. Story 43 They hired a bunch of people with 0 experience who made significantly more money than I did for the same job that I had been doing for years. I was making 13 and they started at 18 and my manager said the budget wouldn't allow raises. Story 44 When I didn't get a raise because I had used all 5 of the sick days we were given per year, the CEO said that if you had to use all 5 sick days in a year, you were underperforming. It was a non-profit and I was their vocational evaluator. I easily brought in 20K per month in assessments that I billed out to the state. I noped out of that place and got a new job paying a lot more. Story 45 Place had no security cameras, working graveyard, got held at gunpoint, told my boss in the morning, did nothing to raise security or safety around the workplace, quit the day after. Story 46 I was working inside a Home Depot advertising Parker and Sun Services air conditioning so I had to approach people. I'm Italian so I have an accent. This man started making racist remarks and mocking me with his little kid saying stuff like do you understand what she's saying? I just left, quit on the spot. Story 47 I was a custodian at the high school that I also graduated from. I was in charge of taking care of the swimming locker room, and those kids were all year. One day I went in there and they stuck pencils in the drains and snapped them off so the entire drain was full of broken pencils. I wrote my boss a note, went home, drove back, dropped off all my uniforms in a garbage bag, and I haven't been back to that hole since. Story 48 When a manager where I worked when I was 20 bullied so many of the staff 3 of us got signed off by our doctors with stress. My doctor told me to write out my resignation and post it to them stating my leave due to stress covers their notice period. I got a friend to hand deliver it and took great satisfaction knowing I'd never have to go back there, and they were screwed. Story 49 I had 3 owners of the business that never agreed, so if I did something one said, the other would be mad at me. It was like trying to serve a 3-headed monster, and it got to the point where I was just frozen in place and unable to do anything. Story 50 When I was robbed, my boss would not give me and my coworker time off to deal with the trauma, and instead of giving us some time off she said it's not the company's problem. I've been robbed before all the time when I worked at a gas station, get over it. Some people just major. Story 51 Worked at a smoothie shop owned by an absolute Karen. She wrote up on the board one morning after I had closed the night before and said 20 was missing from the till, and that was one of these 3 people, then listed my name with the girl that was closing with me and someone else who had worked earlier. straight up accusing us of being thieves so that everyone who worked there could see. Later that day she came in and said, "Good news guys. I found the 20 stuck to another bill in the bank bag," as if it was no big deal. Ended up quitting immediately that day with no notice. Story 52. I brought in a client, and my boss got in my face about the work I was doing for them. I told her, "If you want to do it, have at it," and walked out the door. Took the client with me.